First contact. The massive Nexar colony ship emerged from hyperspace like a silver arrow piercing Earth's atmosphere. Commander Lyra stood at the helm, her iridescent scales shifting colors under the command center's lights as she watched the blue planet grow larger in the viewscreen. After 50 years of searching across the galaxy, they had finally found it, a habitable world with no intelligent life signatures. Preliminary scans complete, Commander, announced First Officer Thorne, his crystalline interface implants glowing as he processed the data. Atmosphere composition ideal. Radiation levels normal. Biological activity minimal but present. No technological signatures detected. Lyra's facial ridges contracted in what her species considered a smile. The scans confirmed what their long-range probes had indicated: Earth was abandoned, a pristine world ready for colonization. The Great Council would be pleased. Begin landing sequence, she ordered. Deploy the first settlement unit in Grid 7. The massive ship descended through clouds turned golden by the setting sun, its shadow falling across the ruins of what had once been Seattle. Nature had reclaimed much of the city, vines crawled up the crumbling skyscrapers, trees burst through cracked pavement, and wildlife roamed freely through the empty streets. As the landing struts touched down in what had once been a sprawling park, Lyra felt a flutter of excitement in her secondary heart. This would be her legacy, establishing the first Nexar colony on this promising new world. But someone else was watching the landing. High up in an overgrown apartment building, Marcus Reed lowered his binoculars and frowned. The former Army Ranger hadn't survived 20 years alone on Earth by being careless, and these aliens were definitely cause for concern. Their technology was like nothing he'd ever seen, even compared to humanity's peak before the evacuation. He checked his modified rifle, running calloused fingers over the worn stock. The weapon was a hybrid of human and salvaged alien tech he'd collected over the years, not pretty, but deadly effective. Not that he planned to use it. Yet. Marcus had been one of the few who chose to stay behind when humanity fled to the stars. Someone had to remain, to watch over their homeworld until the day their people could return. He'd seen others come, scavengers, explorers, even a few attempts at settlement. But nothing like this. The Nexar, as he'd heard them identify themselves in their transmissions, were clearly here to stay. The first landing party emerged from their ship, their environmental suits gleaming. They moved with military precision, securing a perimeter while automated construction units began assembling their base. Marcus had to admit, they were impressive. Professional. Careful. But they'd made one critical mistake: they assumed Earth was empty. He watched as Commander Lyra emerged, her commanding presence obvious even from a distance. She supervised the deployment of atmospheric sensors and security systems, her movements confident and purposeful. This was someone used to success, used to things going according to plan. Marcus allowed himself a grim smile. Time to introduce a little chaos into those plans. He keyed his radio, the old military frequencies still functioning after all these years. Base, this is Watchman. We have visitors. Alert all outposts but maintain Protocol 7. No engagement without authorization. A burst of static, then 3 clicks, acknowledged. The Nexar continued their methodical setup, unaware that hidden eyes watched their every move. As night fell, their base blazed with light, a beacon of advanced civilization in the wilderness Earth had become. Marcus observed their patrol patterns, their defensive positions, their blind spots. Knowledge that would prove useful if diplomacy failed. The next morning, as the alien sun rose over their new colony, Commander Lyra stepped out to survey their progress. A glint of metal caught her eye, something that hadn't been there the night before. On a cleared patch of ground near the base perimeter stood a simple metal pole, and on it flew an old, weathered flag. The stars and stripes still bright against the morning sky, a message as clear as any words. This world was not abandoned. It was waiting. Lyra stared at the flag, her species equivalent of adrenaline flooding her system. "Thorn," she called sharply. "Scan everything. Now." Before Thorn could reply, a voice echoed across their external communications channel, rough, human, determined. "Welcome to Earth," Marcus broadcast from his hidden position. "We should talk about your homesteading plans." The Nexar colony's first day on Earth had just become considerably more complicated than their scans had led them to believe. And Marcus Reed, the last guardian of humanity's homeworld, intended to keep it that way. Hidden truths. Commander Lyra stood in the ruins of what had once been a research facility, her scaled fingers tracing the faded warning signs on the walls. 2 weeks had passed since their first contact with Marcus Reed, and what had started as a simple colonization mission had evolved into something far more complex. "Commander, you need to see this," Thorn called from an adjacent room. The first officer's crystalline implants pulsed with an urgent blue light as he projected a holographic display of the facility's recovered data. The images showed humans in protective suits, working frantically in laboratories. Date stamps indicated these recordings were from 25 years ago, just before the Great Exodus. But it was the data scrolling alongside the images that made Lyra's scales shift to a pale shade of concern. "This wasn't a natural plague," she murmured, studying the genetic sequences. "These are engineered markers. Someone designed this." Outside the facility, Marcus Reed moved silently through the underbrush, watching the Nexar research team through his scope. He'd allowed them to find this facility, curious about what conclusions they might draw. The truth about humanity's departure was a burden he'd carried alone for too long. A series of explosions suddenly rocked the Nexar colony in the distance. Marcus smiled grimly, right on schedule. While the aliens investigated the old facility, his resistance fighters were systematically disrupting their settlement efforts. Nothing lethal, just enough to keep them off balance. Inside the facility, Lyra's communicator crackled to life. "Commander, we're under attack. Multiple explosions at the construction sites. Maintain defensive positions," she ordered, but her attention remained fixed on the data. Something about these genetic sequences seemed familiar, triggering warnings in her species' collective knowledge base. A shadow moved in the doorway. "Interesting reading, isn't it?" Marcus stepped into view, his rifle pointed at the ground, present but not threatening. Both Thorn and Lyra spun to face him, their weapons half raised. "You've been leading us here," Lyra stated, her eyes narrowing. "Why?" Marcus leaned against a dusty console. "Because you need to understand what you're really dealing with. Earth isn't just some abandoned planet ripe for colonization. It's a crime scene." Thorn's implants flashed as he processed this statement. "The plague that drove humans away, it bears similarities to biological weapons used in the Centauri sector a century ago." Marcus nodded grimly. "Now you're getting it. We called them the Harbingers, though that probably wasn't their real name. They never showed themselves, never made demands. Just released the plague and waited for us to die. But humanity escaped," Lyra said, pieces falling into place. "You evacuated instead of fighting." "Most of us did," Marcus corrected. "Some of us stayed behind. Watching. Waiting. The Harbinger's plague didn't work quite as well as they planned, some humans were naturally immune. We adapted, went underground, kept Earth's heart beating." Another explosion rocked the facility. Closer this time. Lyra's scales rippled with frustration. "Your resistance fighters are well coordinated." Marcus smiled. "They're my daughter's people, actually. Maya leads them now. I'm just the old man who watches and warns." Speaking of warnings. He tossed a data chip to Lyra, who caught it reflexively. "You might want to look at your colony's medical reports from the past week." Lyra's eyes widened as she inserted the chip into her neural interface. "Impossible. 3 of our workers are showing signs of the same plague that drove us away." Marcus finished. "Yeah. It's still here. Still active. And your presence, your mining operations, your terraforming attempts, you're waking it up. Along with something else. Deep beneath the facility, in chambers undisturbed for decades, ancient machinery hummed to life, responding to the vibrations of the surface explosions. Warning signals began broadcasting on frequencies long forgotten, calling to masters who had seeded Earth's destruction a generation ago. You have a choice to make, Commander, Marcus said, stepping back toward the shadows. Keep trying to claim Earth and face what's coming, or work with us to stop it. Maya will contact you tomorrow with coordinates for a meeting. Just remember, we survived here for 25 years because we learned to listen to the silence, and right now, the silence is screaming. He vanished into the darkness, leaving Lyra and Thorn with the facility's dark revelations. The commander stared at the genetic data swirling before her, her mission parameters shifting with each new piece of information. They had come to claim a world, only to find themselves in the middle of a war they hadn't known existed. In the distance, Maya's resistance fighters melted away into the ruins, their message delivered. The Nexar colony's lights blazed against the gathering dusk, a beacon that might be drawing more than just human attention. And deep underground, something stirred in its long slumber, awakening to the presence of new life above. The Harbinger's legacy was not just a plague, it was a doorway. And that door was slowly beginning to open. The underground. The elevator plunged deeper into Earth's crust, carrying Commander Lyra and a small team of Nexar scientists through layers of rock and reinforced barriers. Maya Reed stood at the controls, her father's weathered features reflected in her own face but softened, her dark eyes carrying the same determination but tempered with a diplomat's patience. "Welcome to Haven," Maya said as the doors opened to reveal a vast underground cavern. Home to 12,000 survivors of the plague. Lyra's scales shifted through shades of astonishment as she took in the sight. The humans had built an entire city beneath the surface. Hydroponic gardens stretched toward artificial sunlight, children played in communal areas, and advanced machinery, some of it clearly reverse-engineered from alien technology, hummed efficiently throughout the complex. "Impossible," Thorn whispered, his implants struggling to process the sensor data. "Our scans never detected any of this." "That was the point," Marcus said, emerging from a nearby corridor. "The Harbinger's technology relies heavily on surface scanning. We learned to go deep, to shield ourselves, to become ghosts in our own world. But something had changed. The proud underground city now buzzed with nervous energy. Medical teams rushed between quarantine zones, and Lyra noticed more than a few worried glances cast their way. "Show them," Maya instructed, leading the group to the medical wing. Through observation windows, they could see dozens of humans in isolation chambers, their skin marked with the telltale signs of the plague's resurgence. "It started 3 days ago," Maya explained, her voice tight with concern. "At first, we thought it was just a normal viral outbreak. But then we realized, it's the same plague that drove us away, only it's evolving." Thorn stepped forward, his implants interfacing with the medical equipment. "These genetic markers, they match what we found in our infected workers. But there's something else." His crystalline augmentations pulsed with alarm. "The virus is becoming more sophisticated, more targeted. It's not just attacking randomly anymore, it's learning." A deep rumble shook the cavern, causing dust to drift down from the ceiling. The tremors had been increasing in frequency over the past week, each one stronger than the last. "That's not from the surface," Marcus noted grimly. "Something's moving down there, in the deeper tunnels. We've lost contact with 3 of our outer settlements already." Lyra turned to face him. "You know what it is, don't you?" Marcus shared a look with Maya before responding. "We always wondered why the Harbingers never came to claim Earth after releasing the plague. Now we think we know why, they were already here, sleeping, waiting for the right moment. The plague wasn't meant to kill us," Maya continued, pulling up holographic maps showing a network of deep tunnels spreading like veins beneath the surface. It was meant to transform us. To make us compatible. Compatible with what? Lyra asked, though she feared she already knew the answer. Another tremor, stronger this time, rattled the medical equipment. In the isolation chambers, the infected humans began to stir, their movements becoming more synchronized, more purposeful. With them, Marcus said softly. The Harbingers didn't just seed Earth with a plague, they seeded it with themselves. Microscopic spores that would infect, adapt, and eventually transform any intelligent life they encountered. We thought we'd escaped by leaving, but we really just delayed their plans. Thorne's analysis confirmed the horrifying truth. The virus in your people and in our workers, it's not just similar to the original plague. It's an advanced form of it. The Harbingers have been down here all this time, evolving, waiting for new hosts to arrive. Maya led them to a secured room where a large screen displayed thermal imaging of the deep tunnels. Hot spots were appearing everywhere, moving upward, converging. Your colony's activities on the surface, she explained, the mining, the construction, it's accelerating their awakening. And now they're rising. Commander Lyra watched the heat signatures multiply, her military mind already calculating the implications. How long? Days, maybe hours, Marcus answered. We've already started evacuating the outer sections of Haven. But we can't run forever, and we won't survive on the surface alone. Then we work together, Lyra declared, her scales shifting to a deep, determined blue. Your knowledge of Earth and these tunnels, combined with our technology and weapons. It won't be enough, Maya interrupted, bringing up another display. Look at these infection rates. Even if we could fight them directly, the plague is spreading too fast. We need a cure, and we need it now. Thorne's implant suddenly pulsed with excitement. Commander, the genetic data we collected from the research facility, combined with our own medical database, there might be a way to reverse the transformation process. Hope flickered in Maya's eyes. How long to develop it? Normally, weeks, Thorne admitted. But if we combine our medical AI with your underground facility's processing power. Another tremor shook the cavern, this one strong enough to knock equipment from shelves. In the isolation chambers, the infected humans turned as one, their eyes now reflecting an alien intelligence. We don't have weeks, Marcus stated, checking his weapon. Whatever we're going to do, it needs to happen now. The Harbingers are waking up, and this time, they're not just going to infect us, they're going to become us. Lyra looked around at the underground city, at the thousands of humans who had survived against impossible odds, at her own people who had come seeking a new home only to find themselves in an ancient war. Then we make our stand here, she declared. Together. As if in response, a distant roar echoed through the tunnels, a sound that belonged to no earthly creature. The final phase of the Harbinger's plan had begun, and the real battle for Earth was about to begin. Ancient enemy. The command center of Haven buzzed with frantic activity as humans and Nexar worked side by side, monitoring the advancing threat. Massive holographic displays showed hundreds of heat signatures converging from the deep tunnels, while medical readouts tracked the spreading infection through both populations. We've lost contact with Level 7, Maya announced, her voice steady despite the news. The infection has spread through the entire medical wing. We had to seal it off. Commander Lyra studied the tactical display, her scales a dark shade of concentration. In the 3 days since their alliance formed, they'd lost 4 more underground levels to the Harbingers. The infected, both human and Nexar, had begun to change in ways that defied biological understanding. Thorne, status on the cure. Lyra demanded. Her first officer's crystalline implants pulsed with data streams as he coordinated with the human scientists. We're close. The combined genetic algorithms are showing promise, but... He hesitated. We're missing something. Some key component of the Harbinger biology that we can't synthesize. A massive tremor rocked the facility, stronger than any before. Marcus burst into the command center, his rifle covered in a strange, luminescent fluid. "They've breached level 5, he reported grimly. "They're not just infected anymore. They're transforming." The tactical screens showed the truth of his words. The heat signatures were changing, merging, becoming something else. The infected had begun to merge into larger, more complex organisms, their human and Nexar characteristics twisting into new forms that seemed to defy the laws of physics. "Show them," Marcus said to Maya. She nodded and activated a secured video feed from level 5. The footage showed what had once been the main hydroponics bay. Now it was a nightmare landscape of biological transformation. Infected humans and Nexar moved with unnatural synchronization, their bodies partially merged with what appeared to be living technology. But it was the structure growing in the center that drew everyone's attention. "Is that?" Lyra started. "A biological transmitter," Thorn finished, his implants flashing with recognition. "They're building something. Sending a signal." Marcus's expression darkened. "Calling the rest of them." The ones who seeded Earth weren't the only harbingers. They were just the advance team. "Why?" Lyra demanded. "Why go to all this trouble? Why not just invade directly?" "Because they're not invaders," came a new voice. Everyone turned to see Dr. Isabel Chen, Haven's lead geneticist, entering the command center. Her lab coat was stained with blood, but her eyes blazed with revelation. "They're farmers." She quickly uploaded her findings to the main display. "Look at the genetic structure of the plague, the way it modifies its hosts. It's not random mutation, it's directed evolution. The harbingers don't want to destroy us or replace us. They want to harvest us. To use our combined genetic material to evolve themselves. That's why they chose Earth," Maya realized. "A planet with intelligent life, with genetic diversity. With potential," Isabel finished. "They seed a planet, wait for the dominant species to reach a certain level of advancement, then trigger the transformation. But humanity surprised them by evacuating. And now, with the Nexar here." Another tremor shook the facility. On the screens, the biological transmitter pulsed with increasing power. "How long until their signal reaches its destination?" Lyra asked. Thorn's calculations were grim. "Hours at most. Once it does. The rest of them will come," Marcus finished. "And Earth won't be the only planet they harvest. They'll use our combined genetics to evolve, to spread, to consume every intelligent species they find." But Dr. Chen wasn't finished. "There's more," she said, bringing up new data. "In studying the merged biological samples, I found something. The harbingers, for all their advanced evolution, have a weakness. Their need to adapt, to absorb new genetic material, it makes them vulnerable to their own evolutionary process." "What are you saying?" Maya asked. "I'm saying we might not need a cure. We need a catalyst. Something that will trigger their evolutionary process but remove their ability to control it. Force them to evolve so rapidly they can't maintain biological cohesion." Lyra's scales shifted to a thoughtful hue. "The terraforming compounds we brought for colonization, they're designed to accelerate biological processes. Combined with the genetic accelerants we developed to survive the original plague." Maya added. "We could create an evolutionary cascade," Thorn concluded, his implants pulsing with calculations. "But we'd need to get it into their biological network. Into that transmitter." Marcus checked his weapon. "Then we fight our way down. Hit them at their heart." "No," Maya countered, pulling up the facility schematics. "Look at these maintenance tunnels. They're too small for the merged forms to navigate. A small team could." Another violent tremor cut her off. Warning lights flashed throughout the command center. "Multiple breaches," someone shouted. "They're coming up through the lower levels." Commander Lyra made her decision. "Maya, take a team through the maintenance tunnels. Get that compound to the transmitter. Marcus, your fighters, and my warriors will hold them here. Dr. Chen, Thorn, you have 1 hour to perfect that catalyst. The rest of us. She checked her own weapon. We give them that hour. As if sensing their plans, an inhuman screech echoed through Haven's corridors. The merged forms were getting closer, their evolutionary process accelerating. The final battle for Earth had begun, and with it, a desperate race to turn the Harbinger's own biology against them. In the depths of Level 5, the biological transmitter pulsed stronger, its signal reaching toward the stars, calling to ancient masters who had seeded countless worlds. The question was no longer whether humanity and the Nexar could stop them, but whether there would be anything left of Earth to save when they did. United Front. The maintenance tunnels echoed with Maya's rapid breathing as she led her mixed team of humans and Nexar through the narrow passages. The biological catalyst, their last hope, was secured in a reinforced container at her side. Above them, the sounds of battle shook the facility's foundations. Status report, she whispered into her comm. Marcus's voice crackled back, punctuated by weapons fire. We're holding level 3, barely. Your mother would be proud, kid. An explosion nearly drowned out his last words. Just get it done. In the command center-turned battlefield, Marcus and Lyra fought side by side. The commander's scales glowed with battle fury as her plasma weapon cut through merged forms that had once been her own people. Marcus's modified rifle picked off targets with surgical precision, every shot counted, every moment bought with blood and courage. The signal is getting stronger, Thorn reported from his secured position, where he and Dr. Chen made final adjustments to the catalyst. 15 minutes until it reaches full strength. Deep in level 5, the biological transmitter had grown, its pulsing mass now filling the entire hydroponics bay. The merged forms surrounded it in concentric circles, their bodies feeding into its structure, building something that was as much machine as it was flesh. Maya's team reached a junction above the transmitter chamber. Through the grating, they could see the horror below. We'll never fight through all of them, her Nexar teammate whispered. Maya smiled grimly. We're not going to fight. She pulled out a small device. We're going to drop in. Literally. Back in the upper levels, the defensive line was crumbling. Marcus took a glancing hit from a bioorganic projectile, the acid eating through his armor. Lyra pulled him to safety behind a barricade. Stubborn human, she muttered, applying a healing compound to his wound. Just like your daughter. Stubbornness kept Earth alive, he grunted, then keyed his comm, Maya, we're running out of time up here. In response, a massive explosion rocked level 5. Maya had detonated charges around the maintenance shaft, sending her team plummeting into the transmitter chamber amid a rain of debris. The surprise attack scattered the merged forms, creating chaos in their normally synchronized movements. Now! Maya screamed, sprinting toward the transmitter while her team laid down covering fire. A merged form lunged at her, its human and Nexar components twisted into something nightmarish. She ducked under its attack, rolling forward with the catalyst container. The signal. Thorn's urgent voice filled all their comms. It's reached critical strength. Above ground, the sky had begun to darken. Something massive was approaching Earth, drawn by the Harbinger's call. The final harvest was beginning. Maya reached the transmitter's core, but hesitated. The biological mass pulsed before her, its surface writhing with what looked like faces, human, Nexar, something older and alien. They seemed to be screaming. Maya, Dr. Chen's voice was steady in her ear. The catalyst has to go into the central node. But, the concentration we created, nothing within 50 meters will survive the reaction. Maya looked at her team, already surrounded by advancing merged forms. No time for retreat. No second chances. Dad, she whispered into her comm. I know, kid, Marcus replied, his voice thick. Your mother would be so damn proud. In the command center, Marcus tried to stand, to go to his daughter, but his injury and Lyra's firm grip held him back. She's made her choice, the commander said softly. Honor it. Maya took a deep breath, then smiled. For Earth, she said, and plunged the catalyst container into the transmitter's core. The reaction was immediate and catastrophic. The catalyst, combined with the terraforming compounds and genetic accelerants, triggered an evolutionary cascade that ripped through the Harbinger's biological network. The transmitter writhed, its carefully controlled evolution spinning wildly out of control. The merged forms around Maya began to dissolve, their component parts unable to maintain cohesion as the cascade effect spread. The transmitter itself started to collapse, its signal distorting, transforming from a beacon into something else. The signal. Thorne shouted. It's changed. The catalyst, it's not just affecting the Harbingers here. The signal is carrying the cascade effect to their entire network. Through the observation windows, they watched as the darkness above Earth shifted, writhed, and began to break apart. The approaching Harbinger fleet was caught in their own evolutionary process, their bioorganic ships dissolving as the cascade spread through their connected consciousness. In Level 5, the transmitter chamber had become a swirling vortex of rapidly evolving and dissolving biological matter. As the merged forms fell apart, something remarkable happened. The human and Nexar components began to separate, the Harbinger influence unable to maintain its hold as it devolved into chaos. And at the center of it all, Maya Reed stood straight and proud, even as the cascade consumed her. Her last act was to trigger the chamber's containment protocols, ensuring the reaction wouldn't spread beyond the sealed level. The battle for Earth was over in minutes. The Harbinger signal died. Their biological network collapsed. The infection began to recede from both human and Nexar victims as the catalyst broke down the alien influence controlling them. Hours later, Marcus stood with Lyra in Haven's medical bay, watching as the last of the infected recovered. Their bodies were their own again, the Harbinger transformation reversed by the cascade effect. The signal analysis confirms it, Thorne reported. The catalyst didn't just stop them here. The evolutionary cascade spread through their entire network. Every world they seeded, every trap they laid, it's all been neutralized. And Maya? Marcus asked quietly. Lyra placed a hand on his shoulder, her scales a soft shade of mourning. She saved not just Earth, but every world the Harbingers had marked for harvest. Generations will remember her name. Marcus nodded, then straightened. There would be time for grief later. Now, there was work to do. So, he said, turning to Lyra. About your colonization plans. The commander's scales shifted to a lighter hue. I believe we have much to learn from each other. Perhaps, a shared settlement. A symbol of what we achieved here together. Marcus looked around at the humans and Nexar working side by side to rebuild, at the survivors of two species who had faced extinction and emerged stronger together. Above them, Earth's surface waited to be reclaimed, no longer a battleground but a home to be shared. Yeah, he said, managing a smile. I think Maya would have liked that. As dawn broke over the ruins of Seattle, the first combined teams of humans and Nexar emerged from Haven to begin the work of reconstruction. Earth had been defended not just by one guardian, but by two peoples united against a common enemy. And in that unity, they had found something neither expected, a future worth building together. The sky above was clear now, free of ancient threats and dark legacies. Earth was no longer waiting, no longer a monument to what was lost. Instead, it had become something new, a symbol of what could be achieved when the last Guardian's stand became everyone's fight.